The lawyer says $6.4 million like it's a normal thing to say to someone still wearing the same black dress from the funeral 3 days earlier, and you ask her to repeat it, not because you didn't hear her, but because your brain needs a second pass to accept that a number this size is now sitting next to your name in a document you haven't finished reading. Your mother's estate came to just over $22 million, most of it in a beach property she'd held since the 1990s, and a portfolio nobody in the family knew the real size of. After estate tax, the federal exemption sitting at $15 million this year and everything above it taxed at 40%. The number that actually splits 3 ways between you and your 2 siblings is $19.2 million. Your third is $6.4 million. You have had this information for 4 minutes, and you already know with total certainty that you have no idea what you're doing. You sign 3 separate documents you don't fully read before the meeting ends, your attorney assuring you they're procedural, and you believe her mostly because you don't have the emotional bandwidth that week to do anything except believe the people telling you things are fine. You drive home afterward and sit in your car in the driveway for 11 minutes without turning off the engine, not doing anything in particular, just sitting with the radio on low, the number floating somewhere just behind your grief instead of in front of it, which feels like the correct order even though nobody told you it should. Your older brother knows exactly what he's doing, or believes he does, which turns out to be a more dangerous thing. 2 weeks after the funeral, he's already looking at a house that costs more than your mother's entire beach property, telling anyone who'll listen about the boat he's been eyeing, and you watch him do this with a specific kind of dread. You try to say something at a family dinner, carefully, not wanting to sound like you're policing his grief or his choices. He doesn't take it well. He tells you, not unkindly but firmly, that he's spent 38 years being the responsible one who never got to enjoy anything, and that he's not interested in turning an inheritance into another obligation to manage perfectly. You don't have a good response in the moment. You just nod and let the conversation move to something else, privately worried in a way you don't fully articulate to him for another 2 months. Your younger sister goes the opposite direction, refusing to touch a cent of it, telling you she feels guilty even having it, which worries you almost as much as your brother's spending, because guilt that large tends to curdle into something worse if nobody addresses it directly. You are, apparently, the only one of the 3 of you starting from something like a neutral, clear-headed place, and you didn't ask for that role. It just fell to you, the way these things fall to whoever happens to be paying the closest attention at the worst possible time. You call the estate attorney back that same week, not the family friend who handled the will, but someone your mother's financial advisor recommends specifically, a woman who specializes in what she calls sudden wealth transitions. She tells you something in the first 5 minutes that reorganizes how you're thinking about the entire situation. The first 90 days after receiving an inheritance like this are the most dangerous window you'll ever have with this money, not because of taxes or markets, but because of people, relatives who suddenly remember they're close with you, a cousin's business plan that materializes within a month, old friends who reappear with impeccable timing. She recommends you do almost nothing publicly for those 90 days. No large purchases, no announcements, no confirming a specific number to anyone outside your 2 siblings and whichever professionals you hire. You ask her, half joking, if this is overkill. She tells you, flatly, that she's watched 3 separate clients lose meaningful fractions of an inheritance in year 1, specifically because they skipped this part, treating the silence as optional instead of structural. Your brother doesn't take the same advice because he doesn't get the same advice, having decided he can manage his third without hiring anyone at all. By month 2, he's put a deposit on the house. By month 3, a distant cousin neither of you has spoken to in a decade calls him directly, not you, with a surefire real estate opportunity requiring $200,000 to get in early. Your brother almost wires it before mentioning it to you at a family dinner, offhand, the way you'd mention a decent restaurant you tried. You ask him 3 questions he can't answer. Who's actually holding the money? What happens if the deal falls through? And why the cousin called him specifically instead of a professional investor. He gets defensive, then quiet. 3 days later, tells you he decided against it, though you're fairly sure it's your questions that changed his mind and not some realization of his own. You don't say that out loud. You've learned fast that being right in this new situation is worth less than being useful, and those aren't always the same thing. Your sister's guilt takes longer to work through, and it's harder in some ways than your brother's spending because there's no single decision to point at and correct. She tells you one night, crying quietly in your kitchen, that she doesn't feel like she earned any of it, that taking the money feels like profiting off your mother's death in a way she can't get past. You don't have a clean answer for her. You just tell her the money existing doesn't change what it costs to get it, and that refusing it doesn't undo the cost either. It just leaves it on the table for no reason. She doesn't fully agree that night. She starts seeing a therapist the following month, partly for the grief, partly, she admits eventually, for the money, which surprises you until you realize it shouldn't. You sit with her once, a few weeks into this, while she opens a bank statement showing her third for the first time since the transfer actually cleared, and you watch her hands shake slightly holding a piece of paper with more zeros on it than she's ever seen attached to her own name. She asks you if it ever stops feeling like it belongs to someone else. You tell her honestly that you don't know yet, that you're 4 months into this too, and something about the shared uncertainty seems to land better with her than any reassurance would have. She folds the statement and puts it in a drawer instead of a frame, which feels, watching her do it, exactly right for where she is. You spend your own 90 days doing something closer to homework than anything resembling the life you'd imagined an inheritance would buy. You interview 4 wealth advisors, rejecting 2 immediately because they start talking about your visibility and social profile within the first meeting, as if privacy were a beginner's phase you'll grow out of. One of them, a polished man in a downtown office with a view your mother's actual net worth couldn't have afforded, spends the first 20 minutes describing a philanthropic naming opportunity before asking a single question about what you actually want, and you leave that meeting more unsettled than when you arrived. You hire the third, a quieter firm that specializes in exactly the kind of low-profile structuring you're now realizing you need. A revocable trust to keep your name off public probate records where possible, a separate LLC to hold the beach property so it doesn't trace directly back to you in a simple public record search, and a private banking relationship instead of a retail one. Mostly, your advisor explains, because retail banking staff talk, not maliciously, just casually, in ways that travel. She asks you, in the first meeting, what you're actually afraid of, and you're surprised to hear yourself answer honestly. Not losing the money exactly, but losing the version of your life where people around you are still relating to you instead of to a number. You don't quit your job. The same instinct you didn't fully understand in yourself until your advisor confirms it's the right one. Continuity of a normal daily life is, functionally, its own privacy structure. A person still going to work every day doesn't read as someone who just inherited 8 figures, even to people who technically know. A local news reporter doing a piece on your mother's old beach property, a minor local landmark, calls your office directly, having found your name through public probate filings your attorney hadn't been able to fully shield in time. She's not hostile, just doing her job, asking gentle, specific questions about the property's future and, carefully, about the family behind it. Your hands are shaking slightly by the second question, not because anything she's asked is aggressive, but because you can feel, in real time, how easily a warm, conversational tone could pull more out of you than you mean to give. You give her nothing beyond a single polite sentence about respecting your mother's privacy, and you call your attorney the second you hang up, your voice tighter than you expect it to be when she picks up. She tells you This was always the most likely leak point, probate records being genuinely difficult to fully seal, and that the sentence you gave the reporter was exactly right, boring enough to end the story before it started. The piece runs 2 weeks later, 4 paragraphs, no number mentioned, your name appearing once in a caption. You read it 3 times, waiting for a version that feels worse than it does. It doesn't come. The three of you sit down together for the first time since the funeral to actually talk numbers instead of grief. Your brother, chastened by the almost wired $200,000, has hired an advisor of his own by now, a real one this time. Your sister has stopped calling the money guilt and started calling it, tentatively, a resource, a word she chooses carefully, like she's still testing whether she's allowed to use it. You've built the structure your advisor recommended: trust, LLC, private banking, and a rule you've set for yourself that you don't fully explain to either of them yet. No confirming a specific number to anyone who asks directly, family included, for at least another year. The conversation is more awkward than you expect. Three siblings who've spent their whole lives avoiding money as a topic now, forced to sit in it together for 2 straight hours. There are a few tense moments, your brother bristling slightly when you mention the cousin's deal again, your sister going quiet when the trust structure comes up, clearly still working through what it means to have money legally protected from her own impulses. Nobody storms out. You leave the meeting believing wrongly that the hardest part is behind you. Your sister asks gently if the no confirming numbers rule applies to her too. You tell her yes, not because you don't trust her specifically, but because the fewer people who know the exact figure, family included, the fewer conversations start from expectation instead of an actual relationship. You watch something close slightly in her face when you say it. She doesn't argue. She just goes quieter for the rest of the evening, and you tell yourself it's nothing, that she's still processing everything else this year has handed her. It isn't nothing. Over the following months, you notice her calling less, small holidays skipped that she never used to skip, a specific new formality in how she talks to you about anything financial, careful and clipped in a way that wasn't there before. You bring it up directly in month 5, and she tells you, finally, plainly, that being told she couldn't be trusted with a number, even framed as a general rule and not a personal judgment, landed as exactly that anyway. She'd already been fighting a private feeling that she didn't deserve the money. Being handed a rule that treated her like a leak risk on top of that, you try to explain the actual reasoning again, the 90-day window, the advisor's warnings, the real mechanics of how information travels through families and turns into expectation. She hears you. She tells you she understands the logic completely, and that understanding the logic hasn't made it feel any less like being fenced out by the one sibling she'd trusted most through the worst year of her life. You don't have a rebuttal that fixes this. You're not sure one exists. 8 months out, the reporter's 4-paragraph piece is long forgotten. The cousin's real estate opportunity turned out, you later confirm through your advisor's own quiet research, to have been genuinely fraudulent, already under a state inquiry unrelated to your family entirely. You tell your brother this over the phone, half expecting relief, and instead hear a long silence before he admits he'd thought about the $200,000 more than once since deciding against it, wondering if he'd been overly cautious. Hearing the actual outcome seems to close something in him that had stayed quietly open for months. Your brother's new house is real, but modest relative to what he could technically afford, purchased only after his own advisor helped him separate what he wanted from what he'd been performing for people who'd mostly stopped paying attention 6 months later anyway. The financial side of this, the actual protocol, the trust, the silence, the vetting, worked exactly the way it was supposed to. Nobody got defrauded. No number leaked beyond a single boring newspaper caption. On paper, by every metric your advisor uses to measure this kind of transition, it's a clean success. Your sister still calls less than she used to. You still don't know, a year out, whether that's something that heals on its own timeline or something you damaged in a way that doesn't fully undo. You think, some nights, about the 4 minutes in the attorney's office when you first heard the number and understood nothing except that you didn't understand it yet. What you understand now, a year later, is smaller and less comfortable than you expected it to be. That protecting money from the outside world is a solvable, learnable problem with real rules that actually work if you follow them. Protecting the people closest to you from what that same protection can quietly cost them is a different problem entirely, and you're still, a year in, nowhere close to solving it.